Welcome to His Word Heals. You can also visit us online at www.hiswordheals.com. Today's message is part 2 of Ezekiel's Whirlwind vision of Aurora Borealis. In part 1 last week, we explored Ezekiel's fiery whirlwind out of the north, which he describes in Ezekiel chapter 1. We proposed, along with supporting evidence, that Ezekiel may well have been given a vision of a very strong low-latitude Northern Lights Aurora Borealis event, perhaps an end times Carrington strength event. We also explored the 4 living creatures which Ezekiel saw in chapter 1 coming from within the fiery whirlwind from the north, and illustrated how a view of the constellations from a North Pole vantage point could very well be representative of these 4 creatures, which would in turn represent end times nations and world powers over which they rotate. Then we were ready to connect chapter 1's fiery whirlwind with the stormy wind, same as whirlwind, in chapter 13 of Ezekiel, which destroys walls of untempered mortar. We finished part 1 by reading Ezekiel chapter 13, which is also where we will start today's part 2. But first, for context and a reminder, we will reread Ezekiel chapter 1. If you haven't watched part 1 of this series yet, you can do so on our blog page at www.hiswordheals.com. Ezekiel chapter 1, and today we're only going to read the verses that pertain to Ezekiel's fiery whirlwind vision, and that would be Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. Now it came to pass in the 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river Chebar, that the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of Elohim. On the 5th day of the month, which was the 5th year of King Jehoiakim's captivity, the word of Yahweh came expressly to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Chebar, and the hand of Yahweh was upon him there. Then I looked, and behold, a whirlwind was coming out of the north, a great cloud with raging fire engulfing itself, and brightness was all around it, and radiating out of its midst like the color of amber out of the midst of the fire. Also from within it came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. Again, last week's part 1 goes into detail of why, including in the Hebrew, the words behind whirlwind, why we believe that this fiery whirlwind could actually have been an Aurora Borealis out of the north. So please watch part 1 for more details on that. Today we're going to connect Ezekiel chapter 1 with Ezekiel chapter 13. As an FYI, last week before reading chapter 13, we summarized each of Ezekiel's chapters 2 through 12 for context's sake. Again, it's worth going to our website and also watching part 1 of this series, because today we will simply skip to chapter 13. And the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, prophesy against the prophets of Israel who prophesy, and say to those who prophesy out of their own heart, Hear the word of Yahweh. Thus says Yahweh Elohim, Woe to the foolish prophets who follow their own spirit and have seen nothing. O Israel, your prophets are like foxes in the desert. You have not gone up into the gaps to build a wall for the house of Israel to stand in battle on the day of Yahweh. They have envisioned futility and false divination, saying, Thus says Yahweh, but Yahweh has not sent them, yet they hope that the word may be confirmed. Have you not seen a futile vision, and have you not spoken false divination? You say, Yahweh says, but I have not spoken. Therefore thus says Yahweh Elohim, because you have spoken nonsense, and envisioned lies, therefore I am indeed against you, says Yahweh Elohim. My hand will be against the prophets who envision futility, and who divine lies. They shall not be in the assembly of my people, nor be written in the record of the house of Israel, nor shall they enter into the land of Israel. Then you shall know that I am Yahweh Elohim. Because they have seduced my people, saying, Peace, when there is no peace. And one builds a wall, and they plaster it with untempered mortar. Say to those who plaster it with untempered mortar, that it will fall. There will be flooding rain, and you, O great hailstones, shall fall, and a stormy wind shall tear it down. Surely, when the wall has fallen, will it not be said to you, Where is the mortar with which you plastered it? Therefore, thus says Yahweh Elohim, I will cause a stormy wind to break forth in my fury, and there shall be a flooding rain in my anger, and great hailstones in fury to consume it. So I will break down the wall you have plastered with untempered mortar, and bring it down to the ground, so that its foundation will be uncovered. It will fall, and you shall be consumed in the midst of it. Then you shall know that I am Yahweh. Thus will I accomplish my wrath on the wall and on those who have plastered it with untempered mortar. And I will say to you, the wall is no more, nor those who plastered it. That is, the prophets of Israel who prophesy concerning Jerusalem and who see visions of peace for her when there is no peace, says Yahweh Elohim. Likewise, son of man, set your face against the daughters of your people who prophesy out of their own heart. Prophesy against them. And I'm going to stop there at verse 17. Suffice it to say, the stormy whirlwind, the fiery whirlwind of chapter 1, is the same Hebrew word as chapter 13's stormy wind, which tears down the wall of untempered mortar. Could the wall of untempered mortar, which is caused to fall by this stormy wind, actually be a technological wall of protection taken down by a solar storm, which causes a very low latitude strong Aurora Borealis, or extremely bright northern lights? Are the faces of the living creatures seen by Ezekiel in chapter 1, again, perhaps visions of constellations as seen from the North Pole vantage point? After all, the North Pole is where the northern lights, or whirlwind out of the north, originates from, right? Let's take a closer look at these walls of untempered mortar, which this stormy wind out of the north destroys. The King James and the New King James translate the Hebrew word here as untempered mortar, while many other versions translate this word as whitewash, lime, or chalk. The English Standard Version, or ESV, the NASB, which is the New American Standard Bible, the RSV, or Revised Standard Version, the HNV, Hebrew Names Version, the TLV, Tree of Life Version, and the ISR Scriptures Version all translate this Hebrew word as whitewash instead of untempered mortar. Another alternative translation is the Young's Literal Translation, which says chalk instead of whitewash or untempered mortar. There's also another one, and I don't remember which one it was, and it calls it lime. So the majority opinion seems to be whitewash. So where else in Scripture do we read of a whitewashed wall? Matthew chapter 23, verses 27 and 28, Yeshua is speaking, Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but inside are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. Even so, you also outwardly appear righteous to men, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. So here this is a whitewashed tomb, but it's essentially the same thing. The outside is whitewashed, and the inside is not what it appears to be on the outside. Then we have Acts chapter 23, verses 2 and 3, and the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him, and this is by him Paul, to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, Elohim strike you, you whitewashed wall. For you sit to judge me according to the law, and do you command me to be struck contrary to the law? So then whitewashed walls, or walls of untempered mortar, would be having a form or appearance of godliness or righteousness on the outside, but being unrighteous or lawless or rebellious against the word of Yah on the inside. Basically, a hypocrite trusting in a wall of hypocrisy. So essentially, erecting and trusting in a wall of untempered mortar is the same as whitewashing the exterior of the wall with something like chalk, which only appears white, strong, or righteous, but when rain and stormy winds come, the whitewashed, untempered mortar false wall of protection will be washed away, and the defenses you think you've erected or the self-righteous appearances you've trusted in come crashing down. Walls of untempered mortar or whitewashed walls. What is our personal armor supposed to be according to Scripture? In essence, what should our wall of protection consist of? Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 18 say, "Finally, my brethren, be strong in Yahweh and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore take unto you the whole armor of Elohim, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace, or the good news of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith you shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Elohim, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all saints." Essentially, our hedge of protection or strong wall is His Word and faith in and obedience to His Word. This would not only be protection for individuals, but also for countries as well, would it not? When ancient Israel was a good and godly nation, Yahweh gave them victory over their enemies. But when they strayed from His word and rebelled, they were defeated and oppressed by their enemies, correct? So then, if a good wall of protection is faith in and obedience to the word of Yahweh, what would weak walls of untempered mortar consist of? Again, we just looked at a few different translations of untempered mortar, and they were whitewash, chalk, or lime, but mostly whitewash. What are we in the Western world, including Israel, relying on for protection? The word of Yah or our technological prowess? For Israel, it's the Iron Dome and David's sling, both of which are very reliant on technology to operate properly. For the U.S., it's a petrodollar, Federal Reserve, and soon to be completely digital money printing, satellite surveillance, GPS-guided missiles, and other technological weapons as well. Essentially, our walls of protection, which we are trusting in, are technological and not spiritual. These protections all have the appearance of being a strong wall, but without true righteousness and faith in our ultimate protector, they are simply walls of untempered mortar, and our logo in God We Trust on all of our money, as well as our claim that we are spreading freedom and democracy around the world, is simply a whitewashed wall with the ever-decreasing appearance of righteousness. What will happen to these technological walls whitewashed with self-righteousness and no obedience to the word of Yahweh when a stormy, fiery whirlwind from the north hits? If indeed this stormy, fiery whirlwind, which Ezekiel saw in chapter 1 and spoke about in chapter 13, is a very strong solar storm causing very low latitude Aurora Borealis or northern lights, as we suggested in part 1 of this message, What would this extremely strong solar storm do to our technologically whitewashed wall? It would all come crashing down, and our defenses would be made null and void, would they not? Let's read a few more verses in Scripture which also seem to be speaking of this same type of stormy judgment. Isaiah chapter 29, verses 1 through 7. Woe to Ariel, the city where David dwelt. And Ariel is another name for Jerusalem. Add year to year, let feasts come around, yet I will distress Ariel. There shall be heaviness and sorrow, and it shall be to me as Ariel. I will encamp against you all around. I will lay siege against you with a mound, and I will raise siege works against you. You shall be brought down. You shall speak out of the ground. Your speech shall be low, out of the dust. Your voice shall be like a medium's out of the ground, and your speech shall whisper out of the dust. Moreover, the multitude of your foes shall be like fine dust, and the multitude of the terrible ones like chaff that passes away. Yes, it shall be in an instant, suddenly. You will be punished by Yahweh of hosts with thunder and earthquake and great noise, with storm and tempest and the flame of devouring fire. The multitude of all the nations who fight against Ariel, even all who fight against her and her fortress, and distress her, shall be as a dream of a night vision. Now Isaiah chapter 30, verses 27 through chapter 31, verse 9. Behold, the name of Yahweh comes from afar, burning with his anger, and his burden is heavy. His lips are full of indignation, and his tongue like a devouring fire. His breath is like an overflowing stream, which reaches up to the neck, to sift the nations with the sieve of futility. And there shall be a bridle in the jaws of the people, causing them to err. You shall have a song as in the night when a holy festival is kept, and gladness of heart as when one goes with a flute, to come into the mountain of Yahweh, to the mighty one of Israel. Yahweh will cause his glorious voice to be heard, and show the descent of his arm with the indignation of his anger, and the flame of a devouring fire with scattering tempest and hailstones. For through the voice of Yahweh Assyria will be beaten down, as he strikes with the rod, and in every place where the staff of punishment passes, which Yahweh lays on him, it will be with tambourines and harps, and in battles of brandishing he will fight with it. For Tophet, which also means cremation, and also where they burned children, for Tophet was established of old. Yes, for the king it was prepared. He has made it deep and large. Its pyre is fire with much wood. The breath of Yahweh, like a stream of brimstone, kindles it. Woe to those who go down to Egypt for help and rely on horses, who trust in chariots because they are many, and in horsemen because they are very strong, but who do not look to the Holy One of Israel, nor seek Yahweh. Yet he also is wise and will bring disaster, and will not call back his words, but will arise against the house of evildoers and against the help of those who work iniquity. Now the Egyptians are men and not God, and their horses are flesh and not spirit. When Yahweh stretches out his hand, both he who helps will fall, and he who is helped will fall down. They all will perish together. For thus Yahweh has spoken to me, as a lion roars, and a young lion over his prey, when a multitude of shepherds is summoned against him, he will not be afraid of their voice, nor be disturbed by their noise. So Yahweh of hosts will come down to fight for Mount Zion and for its hill. Like birds flying about, so will Yahweh of hosts defend Jerusalem. Defending, he will also deliver it. Passing over, he will preserve it. Return to him against whom the children of Israel have deeply revolted. For in that day every man shall throw away his idols of silver and his idols of gold, sin which your own hands have made for yourselves. Then Assyria shall fall by the sword not of a man, and a sword not of mankind shall devour him. But he shall flee from the sword, and his young men shall become forced labor. He shall cross over to his stronghold for fear, and his princes shall be afraid of the banner, says Yahweh, whose fire is Zion, and whose furnace is in Jerusalem. Amos chapter 1, 13 through 15. Thus says Yahweh, for 3 transgressions of the people of Ammon, and for 4, I will not turn away its punishment, because they ripped open women with child in Gilead, that they might enlarge their territory. But I will kindle a fire in the wall of Rabbah, and it shall devour its palaces, amid shouting in the day of battle, and a tempest in the day of the whirlwind. Their king shall go into captivity, he and his princes together, says Yahweh. Psalms 11, to the chief musician, a psalm of David. In Yahweh I put my trust. How can you say to my soul, flee as a bird to your mountain? For look, the wicked bend their bow, they make ready their arrow on the string, that they may shoot secretly at the upright in heart. If the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? Yahweh is in his holy temple. Yahweh's throne is in heaven. His eyes behold, his eyelids test the sons of men. Yahweh tests the righteous, but the wicked and the one who loves violence his soul hates. Upon the wicked he will rain coals, fire and brimstone, and a burning wind shall be the portion of their cup. For Yahweh is righteous, he loves righteousness, his countenance beholds the upright. Psalms 83, verses 11 through 15. Make their nobles like Oreb and like Zeb, yes, all their princes like Zebah and Zalmunna, who said, let us take for ourselves the pastures of Elohim for our possession. O my Elohim, make them like the whirling dust, like the chaff before the wind. As the fire burns the woods, and as the flame sets the mountains on fire, so pursue them with your tempest, and frighten them with your storm. So all of these tempests, or stormy winds, or fiery stormy winds, are all talking about Yahweh's judgment against the unrighteous. And in Ezekiel 13, the stormy wind destroys or makes fall a whitewashed wall, or a wall of untempered mortar, something that we are believing in for protection that will not be able to protect us from a stormy wind or stormy fiery wind, because this wind will cause the wall to fall. Perhaps this whitewashed, untempered wall is technological in nature. Of course, I have no way of knowing for sure if this was Yahweh's intention. It just is a possibility. If the fiery stormy wind is an Aurora Borealis out of the north with a really strong solar fiery wind, like the 1859 Carrington event, this fiery wind could certainly cause our technological walls to fall. What or who are we believing in as a nation? More importantly, what or who are we believing in as individuals? I'll end today's message by letting Scripture answer that question. Psalms chapter 4. Hear me when I call, O Elohim of my righteousness. You have relieved me in my distress. Have mercy on me and hear my prayer. How long, O you sons of men, will you turn my glory to shame? How long will you love worthlessness and seek falsehood, Selah? But know that Yahweh has set apart for himself him who is godly. Yahweh will hear when I call him. Be angry and do not sin. Meditate within your heart on your bed and be still, Selah. Offer the sacrifices of righteousness and put your trust in Yahweh. There are many who say, who will show us any good? Yahweh, lift up the light of your countenance upon us. You have put gladness in my heart, more than in the season that their grain and wine increased. I will both lie down in peace and sleep. For you alone, O Yahweh, make me dwell in safety. Blessings and shalom to all of you and everyone in your home. Please like and subscribe to this video and visit our website www.hiswordheals.com for more messages like this one. Blessings and shalom to all of you and everyone in your home.